Hello, all. I hope you're all doing well. We are continuing with our weekly portion review, and this week we are in the portion of Chukat, which means decrees or God's decree. And this portion discusses the corpse contamination, right? How do we deal with that, which is called Tum'at Hamet, and also the purification process through the red heifer. It also, we discussed the death of Aaron and Miriam, of course, and the famous failure of Moses with hitting the rock, and at the waters of Merivah. But I would like to focus, as we usually do, on one topic, and today we'll dive into the para aduma, right, the red heifer, which is one of really the greatest unsolved mysteries in maybe even in all of Judaism. And we're even told that with all his wisdom, King Solomon still didn't uncover its deep meaning. But perhaps today we could still attempt to uncover some of its meaning. So, at its core, this mitzvah, this commandment, really reflects a radical and profound rejection of death as the final word. And the Torah does not really passively accept death as the natural end, as some other spiritual worldviews do, right? Our Christian brothers and sisters, for example, the world of spirit is really viewed as the true realm of value, and the physical world ultimately is, since the fall, is ruled by death, right? And it's often seen as broken even beyond repair. Now, Judaism really resists such a submission. Really, Judaism proclaims that death will not have the final say at the end, right? A day will come, as the prophet Zechariah says, when the spirit of impurity will ultimately be removed from earth. And we need to really consider how this idea plays out in the Torah description of the red heifer. Now, we see the priest is commanded to take a red cow, right, without a blemish, and which no yoke has come upon him, right? So we see a cow, which is not a bull, right, is chosen, and this is really representing the fertility of life, right? It's an animal that could reproduce, and it's also the largest and most nourishing domestic animal, definitely at the time, which is closely tied to the human survival and prosperity as well. Not only that, right, the cow also has to be red, which is a color that represents the vitality, blood, really nature's raw power. And it has to be perfect, right? There can't be any blemish on it, and there can't be any yoke on it. It wasn't subject to any yoke, meaning it's never ever served under anyone else, and it's never been subdued. And in short, really, the cow represents life in its fullest, right? It's the most independent and unbroken form of life. But then something strange happens. We then have this very symbol of life is taken and burned, right? Alongside it, though, we added these three different elements. One is the cedar tree, right, which is the tallest tree in the region. Then there's the hyssop, which is the smallest shrub. And then there's this interesting tolat shani, right, which is the worm, the crimson worm, right? And this is really representing death and decay, as of course when we die, there's worms around our body as well. And basically all are together are incinerated and burnt, creating ash. Now this act, in a certain sense, mimics death, right, and destruction, and really the dissolution of all of life, animals and plants, and even something so small as an insect. And then, right, the priest does something that's even more curious, startling. He takes this concept or this thing called the living water, the Mayim Chaim, and he mixes it with the ashes, right? So water, which is of course the source of all life, is poured into a vessel, right, symbolizing really sort of the human being, who is both a body, in Hebrew is a kli, a vessel, and a living soul, which is Mayim Chaim, right, this living water. And this act of fusion between the remnants of death and the flow of life forms this ritual of spiritual resurrection. And it removes the impurity, really, of death, not just by covering it, by also making this proclamation that life can reemerge from death, right? And if we look at it in this light, the red heifer is not just a riddle, but it's a declaration, right? When life reaches its limit, that's precisely when a new life begins. Now, we could still, of course, ask, right, that the sages of Israel told us that the meaning of the red heifer is beyond human comprehension. So how am I even discussing this right now? So yes, this is true. But their point was not that the idea of resurrection is absurd, right? Rather, they were trying to say that humans can't fully grasp the secret of how life emerges from death, right? This is still a mystery to us. And just like we can't fully understand how death interrupts life, right? What this concept of death really means. So we really can't understand how life again flows from death, right? And there is a great mystery, which is the existence of life itself, right? Yet this mystery is still wrapped in hope. And I would end with saying that even though our nation is walking through fire and ash in these difficult times, and through war and even interior division and grief, we're still holding to the hope, to this ancient truth of the red heifer, that from the very place of devastation, right, the waters of life will ultimately flow again. And Israel will rise, will be purified, will be renewed, and we will be unbreakable. Shabbat shalom, and take care.